Good afternoon. Welcome to our fireside chat on cybersecurity. My name is Teresa Talton. I'm a wealth advisor here at Stearns Financial Group in the Chapel Hill office. And joining me is Paul Ewing, a cybersecurity expert at Charles Schwab. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here with me because this is a subject that it affects everyone. And, I've personally been affected. I'm sure you have, everybody has at some
Yeah.
point. And so I think in light of the fact that it's Cybersecurity Month and some of the fraud and hacks that we've seen recently, maybe we thought it was a good time to bring this subject to light for our clients and help them understand some best practices. A lot of it we know, but it's always good to revisit, and maybe there's things that we haven't thought of. So come up with some best practices, share those, and then also what happens or what should you do if you're a victim of some kind of cybercrime, fraud, identity theft. So we're going to talk a little bit about, or just some of the topics we're going to talk about will be email, how to shore up your email, how do you manage passwords, how do you even create a password that is, safe and keep up with them, who are the targets, and then what are the different types of scams. And there's more that we'll cover, but those are just some of the topics that we're going to cover today. And I just kind of want to start out by saying that I think a lot of people feel shame and guilt when this happens to them. And I just want to let that go because, like I said, it's happened to me, my parents, my grandparents, my daughter who's 18. And so it can happen to anyone. And we have to remember, these are criminals. They are
Yep.
brazen and they are determined and they're excellent con artists. And so, with that said, we can get into sort of the meat of everything. I think the first thing I wanted to kind of cover and ask you about, Paul, since you are the expert, can you just kind of define fraud and cybercrime for us?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a great place to start. And again, thanks for having me. As a definition, you can think of cybersecurity as us protecting against fraud. And fraud is essentially fraud, and cybercrime is using fraud to go after and take over or deceive a individual out of either information, or it could be a monetary attack. So that's the definition of fraud and cybercrime. But there's different flavors that we see all the time, different types of scams. And so a lot of this is, you just have to be aware and put your antenna up a little bit and be sometimes a little skeptical and ask questions. And doing some of that will, I think, stop a lot of the crime, or help you from being a victim yourself.
Yeah, I think we get really, in our fast-paced environment and world, we're clicking on things very quickly just to kind of get through it, and
That's it.
need to slow down a little bit and just think sometimes, just for a second, does that make sense? Is that supposed to come to me? So I know we're going to get into that. Let's start with some different types of scams that are pretty common. Do you want to start with maybe phishing? I think this is one that people hear about a lot, and explain sort of what that is and how we can
Yeah.
protect.
Sorry to cut you off. Yeah, no, phishing is one attack vector that is probably the most prevalent. We all have an email account, and Teresa, as you said, some of us are just moving fast through that email, and the fraudsters, the bad actors, they know that, and so they use email and phishing specifically, which is a type of email that is invoking some sort of action, or for you to take some bit of action. So it will, a lot of times, appear to look legitimate, and it'll look like it's from a legitimate source. And you have to actually do a little bit of reconnaissance, I would say. Nowadays, the phishing emails that we're seeing are very good. They look legitimate. They have branding. They have, their languages is spot on. Years ago, they were easy to spot because they were, either misspellings or broken language, and just looked out of place. But nowadays, these phishing emails look good. They look legitimate, and you have to actually study it a little bit more to understand if it is a legitimate email. And doing so, you have to focus on where it's coming from. That's always a good place to start. First of all, were you expecting this? You know, a lot of times there's email that you're expecting, or it's from a provider that you're familiar with or you do business with, and it's just part of the marketing junk that we get in our email every single day. You know, but if it's not, if it's out of the ordinary and unexpected, that's one of those red flags. And as you pick up on that red flag, then you focus on, you know, where is it coming from? Who's the sender? And there it is important to not just look at the name, because they can make the name look whatever they want. It's more about hovering over or highlighting the actual email address, and that will tell us, you know, where it's from. So that could be, you know, legitimate, where it's spelled correctly and the URL and the domain look and match to what you're expecting or what you're looking at in that email. But they've gotten a little crafty about, you know, adding a letter or using a different letter in place of another letter to make it appear, if you're looking at it quickly, that it is legitimate. So that's the first place to start when you're, you know, investigating those phishing emails.
So a one instead of an L or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, I just saw an example. It was Amazon, and instead of ON, it was AN at the end. But if you looked at it quickly, it looked like Amazon.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so another one, this one happened to, I think, my grandparents, and I'll share the story in a minute, but tech support. So what is that kind of scam? What are they trying to do?
Yeah, and I get the occasional call from my mom too, where she's like, "Oh, Apple's calling me, and they're telling me that there's something wrong with my login, or I need to, you know, call them back and take action to fix whatever is broken." So you could take any different direction of, you know, whether it's credentials or passwords, or just maybe there's you owe them money, or is an outstanding bill for something. They want to get you on the line and keep you on the line to try to extract as much information from you, as well as, you know, try to get you to pay something that, you know, suggesting that you owe them for. So, and a lot of times when they're asking for that payment, it's not always in US currency, right? It could be in Bitcoin or gold or gift cards. And so those are some red flags to be on the lookout for. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with just hanging up the phone. If you actually do make the call out, they'll probably call you back, right? Because they've got your number, but you can block that number. But, you know, you're best just to not call and just be suspicious of those requests, because they're typically not legitimate.
Yeah, they called my grandparents, and by the time my grandparents thought to call my husband, who happens to be in security and IT, they were on my grandparents' computer and controlling it, and were
Yeah,
saying that they were antivirus software and they needed to
of
upgrade their
course.
their antivirus software, and so they were looking for credit card payment to do that.
Of course. Yep.
Yeah. So another one, I have so many stories. Imposter. That's another scam. What does that one look like?
Yeah, this one can take several formats. Sometimes it's an imposter, like this is a family member that may be calling you, or maybe it's a family member that's, you know, in trouble and, hey, I need your help. And they're posing as, you know, a family member, or posing as somebody that you're familiar with or you know. Those are typically a little more complex, right? Because sometimes they can create a voice clip that may sound like something that you're familiar with. Otherwise, there's, you know, they could be in pretending to be a company that you're familiar with, or somebody that you do business with. So there's some comfort there that, oh, like I know this firm, or I do my banking here, so this must be legitimate. They're calling me. A lot of times, if there is something truly wrong with your account, you know, they're not going to be calling you out, or, you know, they may have other means of communicating with you. But if you're feeling like, hey, this doesn't sound right or doesn't feel right, hang up the phone again. That's your best solution there. And then just call them back from a number that you know. Like maybe you have a number on the back of your credit card, or if you log into their website and there's a contact us number, use that number and call them and say, hey, I was talking to somebody and they sounded like they were, asking for this, or is there something I need to do? A lot of times they'll say, no, I'm sorry, you were part of a fraud scheme.
Right, right. My mom had an attorney call her saying that my brother was in trouble and, was really creating this sense of urgency and making her very anxious but knew
Yeah.
so much information about my brother. Like information that you really would have had to go do a lot of research. And this person had done that. And so my mom was buying it for a while. And then he said something that triggered a red flag in her. And she said, "Can I get your number and I'll call you back?" And they hung up.
Yeah.
So fortunately, her little hairs went up, but yeah, we have to listen to those, right? Like you said, you have to listen to those gut.
Trust your gut.
Mhm.
If it doesn't feel right, it's not right.
Right, right. And then I think healthcare is a big one. And this is the last one we'll touch on as far as types of scams today, but can you explain the healthcare scams?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes around, where it's time to renew your health insurance, or you have maybe you're looking for supplements to your Medicaid or Medicare, and there may be institutions or appear to be institutions that are suggesting that maybe you need to pay them for this or that. So again, it's just a different flavor, but it's all of the same ploys are in place here. It's a sense of urgency. They're kind of catching you off guard. They're socially engineering you into maybe scaring you or thinking that you need, like, oh my gosh, I'm behind on my payments. I know, I swear my payments have gone through, and so a lot of that is a common thread between all of these different scams that we've been discussing.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that with the way you've described them. So let's pivot a little bit and get into email because
Yeah.
everybody has email, everybody has a phone. So let's talk about security on our devices and we'll start with email.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about how we can protect that a lot better.
Yeah, email is, if we look back years, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, email was always it was never meant to be secure. It was never designed to be secure and is not secure. But we didn't really realize that until, probably 10 years ago, or at least it wasn't widely known that, hey, I shouldn't be sending, documents and sensitive information through email. So with email, there is, I'd say there's a lot of history that we all have in our inboxes that we should take some time to clean out and purge ourselves of that information. But knowing that email is so prevalent these days, it's important that first of all we secure our credentials with our email. And what that means is having unique passwords for the access to that email. And I would say go above and beyond and add a second layer of protection, which we refer to as either multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication. And that second factor, it takes your username and password, which and it adds to it a second factor, right? It could be a PIN or a password, it could be an app, it could be your face or a fingerprint. And all of that is designed to just at least secure the access to that email. A lot of times what we're seeing with some of the fraud with advisors is that your emails are being compromised, or the access to your email is being compromised. And so that leads the fraudsters to sending emails out of your account posing as you as in a legitimate email. And a lot of times we'll see advisors receiving requests for money distributions and maybe wire requests, and a lot of times those are not legitimate, but the fraudsters have gained access to your email, and they're trying every angle to get somebody to send them money.
Right, right, right. And would you say, I'm going to come back to that point just in just a second, but would you say email is sort of the pinnacle of what you really need to make sure is secure? Because I'm just thinking anytime I have an password reset for my Hulu or anything, it always goes to my, not always, but most of the time it goes back to my email and it says verify that you are you through your email, right? So if someone
Yeah.
can get access to my email, then they can reset passwords across the board for me.
That's exactly it. Yeah, and that's a great point. Is as you know, maybe they're trying a new or trying to guess a password, or maybe they have your credentials. You know, they will go in and reset it. And I really like it when a provider will then send an email that says, "Hey, we just reset your password. Was this you?" You know, the fraudsters, if they're in your mailbox, you know, they'll delete that so that you can't see it. But if it's, you know, if it's legitimate and you're doing it and you know it's happening, that's a great validation that, you know, it was you and it wasn't a fraudster.
Right, right. And then let me circle back to the point you made about the wires and money movement with
Mm.
advisors specifically. We do handle a lot of correspondence via email with our clients. So what you said just scared me. But I do want to sort of reassure our clients that that is also why we call a lot of times to verify, like if we haven't already been in communication with a client about, you know, that they're needing money or there's a money coming in from them. If we're not already aware of something like that and just out of the blue, we receive an email request from a client, generally we pick up the phone and we call them both ways. And
Mhm.
so, but certainly going out. And so I just want to reassure our clients that that's why they hear from us. And I know sometimes, you know, one more phone call is not you may not want to hear from us again. You may hear from us a lot already, but we're just trying to protect your information.
Yeah, no, and let me reinforce that. And some types of transactions, we require advisors to authenticate that transaction with a phone call. But I love it when advisors go above and beyond and, you know, reach out on every type of, you know, transaction or money movement. Certainly doesn't need to be every single one, but if you're hearing from your advisor, this is why you're hearing from them, because we're trying to protect your assets and we're just validating that these are legitimate transactions.
Yeah. Yeah. So going back to email, you were talking about password or email. Let's talk about passwords a lot more in detail because that's
Yeah.
something that we all have. We have to log in for everything. So how do you create a password, first of all, that is secure? Like what is the criteria? And I know everybody kind of has
Yeah.
their own criteria, but like from you, if I just had carte blanche to make any kind of password I wanted, what would you say would be the best type of password or length or character to use?
Yeah. So the good old days of 8-character password are gone. I know some of us grew up in business with, you know, that being your Windows login. It's now very much a length of a password trumps a shorter password. And when I say length, that means, you know, we're thinking, you know, 16, 20 characters in length is you know, is a secure password. And the reason being is a short password. There's criminal technology out there that allow them to break a password or crack a password that's short very quickly. And so the longer you take that password out in length, it takes that much longer and that much more computing power to actually brute force break your password and understand what it is. And so a lot of times, hey, criminals don't have time. They'll certainly try the easy ones or try a short break on your password. And if, you know, it takes longer than a minute, they're moving on. But with a 16 to 20 character password, it could take 100 years of computing power to break that password. So length is the most important factor here. Certainly, if you want to add in some complexity, you know, that could be, you know, capital letters and numbers and symbols that also just kind of makes it that much more secure. But also, here's the another important factor is that you can't use the same long password for every single site. You know, you have to have an individual unique password for every single login. And that's where I think a lot of folks have gotten caught up in, like, oh, I've got this long password and it's, you know, I can remember it, but I'm just going to keep using it over and over again on all my sites, thinking and feeling like you're safe. And really what happens is those passwords eventually get compromised, right? And we hear of those breaches where passwords are exposed. The bad actors, they go out and they buy those usernames and passwords, and it's very, very cheap on the dark web. Again, that's where all the criminal activity takes place. They'll buy these credentials and they'll begin to do an attack, which is what we refer to as a credential replay attack. And so they take all of those passwords that they have just acquired, and then they begin to test them against banking sites and financial institutions. And eventually, because we're using that same password over and over again, they're going to get in and they're going to gain access. And so that's the reason why we need a unique password for every single logon, and that's why it's important to have the length over a shorter password.
Okay, that sounds great, Paul. I understand where you're coming from, but 16 to 20 is a lot. Like how should someone, so two questions. One is, should we be using phrases or something we would remember? Should we be using some kind of password manager? Is that a good idea? So can you speak to those ideas?
Yeah, I used to be a fan of the passphrase or password sentence as one way to create a long unique password. And there are strategies around trying to remember a long password that way, and it could be four random words, four-letter random words that you put together, and it creates this password. But you still got to remember it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest challenge is the remembering them. And you don't want to write them down or put them in a document that you're going to password protect. So the best option here is to use some technology to remember those passwords. And so that you mentioned a password manager. So this is a piece of technology that I suggest that you spend some money on, right? It's a few dollars a month. And this technology is designed to remember all of those long, unique passwords that you've been creating. It can also help you create new and random long passwords. And all of that is done through a piece of technology that really you only need to remember one single password, and that's the master password of your password manager. And so I think it may be a little bit easier just to remember one single long password. I use a password manager myself, and my master password is a sentence, and it's got letters and spaces, and I even put some symbols and I went for a little complexity there, and I think I'm about 36 characters in length. And so that's the only password I know and I remember, and everything else is managed by the technology.
Okay. Okay. I like it. I like it. On that same note, sometimes people save their passwords in like on a browser, right? So if I'm shopping at any store anytime and I go there frequently, then I can save my password and my credit card information in their history. So is that a bad idea, a good idea?
Yeah, I am not a fan of saving passwords in your browser, because the challenge with browsers is, they need patching and they need updating on a pretty frequent basis.
Okay.
So if you're not going to use a password manager, which I wouldn't suggest that, I would say try to use a password manager. But if you're going to go down that road of using the browser to remember this stuff, make sure that you are on top of all things security with that browser, as well as the updates that you would be making on your physical device. So I would say don't save them in the browser. Don't save anything in the browser. Save it to your password manager. Actually your password manager can remember credit cards and bank information, and I even have like notes, security notes that I save in my password manager. So instead of the browser, just use some technology, use a password manager.
Okay, so I'm a little old school, as I think you know, and I do write things down, and I don't have a password manager for my personal things because I'm nervous that they would infiltrate my password manager,
Yeah.
and then they'd have everything all at once. And so, but I hear what you're saying, and I'm going to try it with a super long something. And we have them at work, and it seems to have been great, and we haven't had any issues. So I'll go out on a limb, and that's going to be my takeaway from today.
Yeah, and I think a lot of folks are a little nervous about that because it's like, I'm putting all my eggs in one basket,
Mhm.
right? And that's a legitimate concern, but again, you're paying for this technology. So this is their job. So their sole job is to protect the passwords. And there have been some incidents that have occurred over the last several years. As far as I'm aware, they've never credentials have never been exposed from a password manager, but again, that's not to say that it couldn't happen in the future. But that also means just don't throw your money at the first password manager you see. I always suggest a quick search on the internet for best password managers of 2024, and take a look at the top 5, and find one that fits your budget, and it has all of the maybe features and functions that you're looking for, and invest in that password manager. So again, a password manager, any password manager is better than nothing. But as soon as you start paying for this technology, you're going to get some other benefits that typically come with it. For one, which is super helpful, as we're always on multiple devices, so there's some syncing between maybe your phone and your desktop and your computer. If you make a change on one, it's going to sync it back to the other. So wherever you change your passwords, it's always going to be up to date. So that's a syncing feature that you
Nice.
typically have to pay for. And then some have other bells and whistles, like virtual private networks, VPNs. That's another way to secure some information that's over the internet. We'll probably talk more about that. Some have dark web searches, and I think, which is also another nice feature, is what I describe as next of kin provisions.
Hmm.
So as you are passing on, your digital life has some value, and I'm sure folks will want to have access to some of your information. There's password managers that can permission those to have access once you've passed on.
Oh my gosh, that would be such a huge help to like the, adult children of someone who passes away, and
Huge.
especially if it was unexpected and the person who passed didn't have time to like get their affairs in order and, really organize everything. That would be so helpful for someone to be able to go in and know, okay, they have all of these accounts, they have all of these, credit cards or whatever it is, insurance, whatever it is, and they're all kind of in one place.
Yep.
That's great. I did not know about that. So while we're on the topic, I'm going to continue with like safe computing
Yeah.
and encryption. You mentioned that a minute ago. And what is the importance of encrypting our mobile devices, like our phones and our computers? What does that even mean? How do we do that? Should we be doing that? So speak to that for me if you don't mind.
Yeah. So encryption is a way to think of it as scramble the data, and you can only unscramble it if you have the keys to your encryption. And so it's a way to protect data that a lot of times is a little more mobile. So if you have a laptop or your mobile device, it's it's really helpful to enable what we refer to as disk encryption. So if you have a laptop that you're using, you want to encrypt that hard drive, and there's an encryption technology that can help you with that. And the benefit of that encryption is, if you lose that device or it's stolen, no one will be able to open up your laptop and gain access to anything that's on that computer. It's encrypted, and the only way that you can get in is you'd have your own username and password, and then usually there is a second layer or an encryption key that further protects it. But if you're a Windows user, there's a technology called BitLocker, and that's typically a part of the Windows Pro versions. It's just part of the native operating system. You just have to enable it and turn it on. And then if you're a Mac user or Apple user, same type of solution, but it's called File Vault. And again, those it turns on the encryption, and again, it protects you if that device ever gets lost or stolen.
Okay, good. That's great to know. So you're recommending that we do turn these parts of our computers on and you utilize that.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
and many mobile devices too, like Apple phones, they are inherently encrypted. Like a lot of their communication is encrypted, especially if you're using like iMessage. Those are encrypted communication paths. So, a lot of times you don't have to turn it on because it's already enabled.
Okay, I'm glad you said that because, like I said, my husband is in IT, so I defer all of that to him. He defers finances to me. It works out great.
Yeah.
But I don't know what, like, I can afford to be sort of ignorant on this topic because I have at work, I have IT who helps me, and at home, I have IT who helps me. So, but this is good for me to know. I need to know this. So this is wonderful. As far as the Wi-Fi, you mentioned VPN and, public Wi-Fi. How should we be thinking of that? Like if I go to a coffee shop, is it okay if I use their public Wi-Fi or a hotel lobby or whatever it is?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll tell you, I am not a huge fan of public Wi-Fi. And the reason being is you don't really know what's securing that Wi-Fi. You don't know what's going on behind the scenes, so to speak. And sometimes that Wi-Fi is not all that it is appearing to be. So you could be sitting in a coffee shop and it looks like that's their, free guest Wi-Fi, but it could be somebody sitting next to you who's sort of spun up their own hotspot or their own Wi-Fi connection that now appears to look like that coffee shop's Wi-Fi, and you start to connect to it, and you start to do your work, travel to websites. There's an opportunity for that bad actor there to see exactly what's happening in that transaction or in that connection. So it's best to just stay off public Wi-Fi as much as you can. I know it's always difficult, especially if you're limited on like a data plan, but I would always suggest use a cellular connection over a Wi-Fi connection, and as a public Wi-Fi rather. And again, I that sometimes eats up minutes or data. I was in the same boat for a long time until I don't know why it took me so long to get to a unlimited data plan, but I'm glad I'm glad I'm there because I travel a lot for work and I'm never on the hotel Wi-Fi. I'm always just on cellular. And so that's the best way to do it. Now, if you need to use public Wi-Fi, so there is a piece of technology that can help protect that transmission of data while you are on that Wi-Fi. And that's what I mentioned, the VPN connection, so a virtual private network. So this is a piece of technology. Again, this is one that you may want to purchase or maybe a part of, your password manager, depending on which one you choose. And that essentially you turn it on while you're on public Wi-Fi, and it now will encrypt the data as it's passing from your machine to the internet, and it hides what's going on because it's scrambled, it's encrypted. And so if you need to be and use public Wi-Fi, that's the safest way to transact through public Wi-Fi.
Okay. That's good to know. Yeah, and I've always heard you're not supposed to really be on the, coffee shop Wi-Fi. Certainly if you're like looking at your bank account or
Oh yeah,
personal information, like that's something you would only use your hotspot for, or just wait till you get back home. But
that's right.
if you can. So as far as updating the computer, we were talking about that. How important is it to have, antivirus software, and what do we do once we have it? What do we do with it? Do we have to update it? What does that entail?
Yes, you need antivirus, you need malware technology. So those are kind of I would say the basics of any computing setup that you would have. So antivirus and malware technology is again something that you typically pay for, you subscribe to, and it's technology that will be looking for and scanning for malicious threats that may be installed or a part of your computer, or it could stop some of that from being deployed on your devices. And so those those applications need updating and regular updating. So a lot of times it may be a daily update, it may be a weekly update, but you want to make sure that you're applying those updates to your devices. And when you have those updated, you're going to be better protected from any of the recent threats or vulnerabilities that are out there. That being said, you also want to make sure that your operating systems are staying up to date, and that software that you may have, other software that you may have installed is patched and updated as well. And so a lot of times when you either set up those applications, you can prescribe that they just automatically update. So when a new version is available, apply that update. That's the best way to manage it. And then for your operating system, so thinking, Windows or any of the Mac operating systems, make sure that you are, setting those to run in an automated fashion, and just don't ignore them. That's always the challenge with these updates is they're so easy to ignore.
Yeah.
And I'll snooze this for another 8 hours or whatever. And yeah, it's the more you snooze it, the longer you put it off, I'd say the worse it gets, or
Mm.
at least from a timing standpoint. I used to deal with this all the time with my kids. They would ignore the updates, and then their computer starts to slow down, and then they're upset because they're so far behind on their updates that it's taking 2 hours. And if they would have just incrementally applied these updates, it wouldn't have disrupted them. And it's a shorter process. Two, another way to approach the updates is to let them run in the overnight. And I know some of us don't like to leave our devices on. I would suggest, if you're a regular computer, leave your device on overnight or put it into like sleep or snooze mode. You know, the updates then can still be applied in the overnight, and it can be less disruptive to your day, or you won't have to ignore anything because the updates applied when you're not using the computer.
Right. Mine has to be plugged in order to make the updates happen overnight. If I just leave it on, but somewhere sitting in the room, it doesn't update. So it needs
Yeah.
the
Yeah, every device is a little bit different, but I'm thinking of like my grandparents who are not big computer people, so they know they have email on this computer. They'll turn it on and do a few emails, and then they turn it right off,
right.
and then you're not getting those updates applied.
Right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I am definitely guilty of the lack of updating my new what was it called? The versions of,
The iOS,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah,
Hmm.
because on my Mac, my husband will sometimes every once in a while look at it and realize how behind I am. And
Yeah.
so guilty. I'm one of Let's maybe pivot over to some social media and putting our personal information out there on social media. What is your take on that? It's so hard these days to stay up with current events and know what is going on in your neighborhood, your community, your family, if you're not on some kind of social media. And, that sort of implies you're sharing some information. But what tips do you have surrounding that area?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I'm a fan of social media. I have all of the latest and the greatest social media accounts, and I'm always just cautious about what information I put out there. Maybe I'm more of a lurker than a poster, but the information that I do share, I set to be private, or only to the people that I know. I don't have much of a public persona, except for maybe LinkedIn, which is more business related. But on the personal side, there's not much that I will share. And I'll tell you, I see this a lot on Facebook, where there's a post that goes around that it has a bunch of questions that everyone needs to answer, and then you share those questions and then have your friends answer them. And I just cringe every time I see that, because like, hey, those are the questions, those are like the security questions, or these are questions of, your personal life,
Yeah,
your, high school mascots and favorite colors. And I mean,
real fun.
you're just handing over great information that can be, certainly used against you. So yeah, just be cautious about what you put out there, try to limit, what is shared, and, keep as much private as you can.
It's really, I mean, it's really hard to live your life now. We've gone from, I remember not long ago, I was mostly shopping in stores, within the last decade. And now I'm mostly shopping online. And I know I'm not alone. And so it's really hard, not just from a shopping standpoint, but just from communicating with people. We do so much of it through that. It's really a balance in trying to be aware and
Hmm.
careful and still being able to sort of live your life a little bit.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and this is something that I've, when you talked about shopping, I'm I'm cautious about putting my credit card out there or where I can. And if I do, I make sure that it's on a secure site and I have a unique password. And if there's, multi-factor authentication, that's turned on. But I will also, if it's available, I like to use, some of the other digital services like PayPal's and Venmo's. Those are services that, provide a little more security between those transactions. And so, your credit card or your bank information is behind their security walls, and so that there's a sense of, I feel a little more security in those types of transactions because there is an intermediary that's sitting in between, that transaction and, whoever I'm shopping with.
okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
And you mentioned secure websites. How do I know if a website is secure?
Well, you can look in your browser for the, there's sometimes there's a little lock that's available, or it says secure somewhere on the browser. A lot of times too, you'll have to look at the URL, the address of where you are. And what you're looking for is HTTPS. So that S in the HTTP signifies that you are on the secure version of that website, and that's where you want to be logging in or transacting. A lot of the more current browsers, though, too, will just have that built in, or it will automatically default or switch you to the HTTPS version because it's looking for, a site that may be not secure, or at least alert you that it's not a secure site. But those are some other things to just kind of look for if you're not sure your browser can, manage that for you.
Okay. So if I'm wrapping up some of the things to look for, some red flags to look for, is a scam coming my way? I'm looking for a sense of urgency. They need it
Absolutely.
right now. They're
Hmm.
trying to scare me or threaten something. I'm not expecting this. This is not something I asked for. And they want some kind of payment, and it may not be, you said it could be some, Bitcoin or some other type of currency outside of the dollar. Am I missing anything else that we should maybe look for?
Yeah, no, I think those are the main red flags. I mean, you can certainly look a little bit deeper into, if it's coming through email, look at the content of that email. Maybe look at links that may be a part of the email. Those links may not be legitimate. So again, if you hover over the hyperlink, it will actually show where it's sending you or taking you. Those are some things just to be more cautious around email, but that's actually how they operate. It's a sense of urgency. It's, their scare tactics, and once they've got you, it's a transaction that, that doesn't feel familiar, or, they're asking for payment in some other, currency.
So these are things we look for. Now, how would you think, or how do you suggest that we best protect ourselves or be vigilant about this? What are things that we can do to just protect ourselves when we are online? Other than
Yeah.
you mentioned some, but is there anything else?
Yeah, it's important to really be cautious about, what you're doing and how you're doing it, and be skeptical. We talk a lot about identity theft with advisors and with their clients. And some different ways to protect your identity and your information are focused on freezing your credit and freezing your credit reports. So that's always a great way to take an additional step to protect that information. The challenge comes with if you need access to it. So the benefit of a credit freeze is that no one can gain access to your line. You set up a line of credit on your behalf. No one has access to your credit through credit bureaus because it's frozen. And that's typically when your identity is stolen or your information is out there, that's where they go to get funds, right? I'm going to open up a credit card, or I'm going to create a line of credit and withdraw. So the credit freezes are a great way to protect yourself, as well as we've got some resources at Schwab that we've published on our website. So we have a site that we call Schwab Secure, or I'm sorry, Schwab Safe, and the URL is schwab.com/Schwab Safe. And there you're going to find all kinds of resources on, like I mentioned, credit freezing. You'll have some information on our Schwab Security Guarantee. And then there's just all kinds of material and literature on just things to be doing to protect yourself while you're online and interacting with the internet. And again, that link can be found on your login page of Schwab Alliance. If you go to schwab.com, it's on the login page there, and you'll be able to just click over there and link to it. And it's a great resource, for protecting and bringing some awareness to yourself.
Perfect. Perfect. So one thing we didn't kind of touch on, but I'm wondering how you feel about this. I feel strongly about just monitoring, watching my transactions and making sure that what's coming through is legitimate. And we were talking earlier, and you were saying that you can set up an alert on your phone for those transactions, which I think my Apple Pay does it, but nothing else I use does. So I think we're both in agreement that that's probably a great idea, because as long as you're watching those transactions, then something's not going to slip through that's unmonitored. And that happened to my daughter recently, like a $20 payment for some place in South Korea came through. And so she fortunately monitors it and caught it very quickly. But I think that's something that I need to do the alerts on other places other than my Apple Pay. But
yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That's one thing that I am pretty conscious of, is just keeping an eye on things, right? Know where your money's going, and there are ways, either through your bank or through credit cards, to create alerts on transactions. And a lot of times I'm getting those push notifications directly from my app that says, hey, here's a transaction, no card was presented for this, is this a legitimate transaction? I have a lot of stuff set up to automatically pay, and yep, I'm expecting that, I know it, and it's going through. And then if occasionally there might be that one transaction, like, oh, this is not right, this is not me. You can jump into action and make the calls, either call the bank, call Schwab, and get somebody on the line and let them know that, hey, these are fraudulent transactions. And I coach advisors and their end clients a lot into creating a sense of urgency around a resolution here, because the faster that we can get involved, or you can alert somebody to help you, the odds of a larger loss go down. And a lot of times we see this with wire transactions that are fraudulent. Sometimes we're able to call back that money that's been wired if we've done it in the right amount of time.
yeah. So it sounds like, let me just sort of recap, because we're at the end of our time together. Let me just recap advice for protecting yourself. You would say, make sure your passwords are really strong. Consider using a password manager. Monitor your transactions. Set alerts on your phone or your devices for any transactions. If you have short passwords, change them to long passwords. And potentially monitor and or freeze your credit. You can just for everybody out there, you can get a free annual credit report from each bureau or each of the 3 bureaus for free at www.annualcreditreport.com. And so we can please speak with your advisor if you want more information on that. But that's a great way to regularly monitor your credit. If you are victim to something, as Paul, you were saying, it might make sense to go ahead and freeze your credit and sometimes even preemptively freeze your credit. We had my husband and I were that health center fraud that happened a few weeks ago. We were notified that our medical information was released, which happened to a client that I know of as well. I'm sure it happened to a lot of people. And so we went ahead and went on to each of the bureaus and we froze our credit because, we're not in that mode where we're having to go pull credit very often. And so when we did that, I noticed that they allow you to, if we were going to go buy a big purchase, a car or something, they allowed us to say, unfreeze it between these hours on these days. So if I was going to go apply for credit, I could go in a few days before at the credit bureau and plan or schedule it to be unfrozen during certain hours so that they could pull credit if I needed it.
I love that feature. Yeah, because it's going to just go back to freezing once it's past that timeline. Yeah, and you don't have to worry about going back in and refreezing it. So yeah, it's a great feature.
Right. So I think that we are going to have some links at the end of this for everyone. If you need more information, we'll have the Schwab site that you were mentioning, Paul, with the resources on cybersecurity. And so our goal was really just to help everyone gain some confidence in knowing what to look for, how to stop the process, how to protect yourself, what to do if it does happen to you. So I thank you so much, Paul, for joining me today. I think we covered a lot of great tips and tricks. And, I definitely have some homework to take away from this. So I appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thanks.
For anybody who stayed with us the whole time, the fun fact is a question of what is behind you on your wall.
I love that question. Yeah, these are racetracks, race circuits in the upper Midwest. So I'm based in Minneapolis, and this is Road America. It's in Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin.
Okay.
And this is Brainerd International Raceway. So that's in Brainerd, Minnesota.
Do you race?
I'm a car guy and I love to take my car on the tracks, and these are tracks that I've been on.
Okay. Excellent. Because there's a lot of, I'm sure the whole hour people are wondering,
What is that?
Or is it abstract art? So
I know.
yeah, that's fun. That's a fun little.
It's a conversation starter.
It is. It's a conversation